Hey guys, so we are going to be programming up System Manager with the SIP entity links from Session Manager to Communication Manager. And then we're also going to be going into Communication Manager and just configuring it up ready for all of our configuration to be done. So what we need to do is log into System Manager. We need to go over to Elements, Routing, and we need to go to SIP entities. Now, what we're going to do first of all, actually, is we're going to go into the Session Manager under Elements, Session Manager, and we're going to go to Network Configuration, and we're going to go to Local Hostname Resolution. Let me just delete those out because they're historic, so we don't need to have them in anymore. But basically, there's two ways of doing this. So what we can do is we can set up a new SIP entity to Communication Manager, and if we just give this a name like CMO1, what we're going to do is we're going to have several different links. So we're going to have a link to CM for our external calls. So we'll call this calls. And then we're also going to have another SIP entity to CM, and that's going to be for features. So that's what our application sequence is going to use. So what we need to do is in the Session Manager local hostname resolution, we're just going to add new. And what we're going to do is we're going to give this a host name. So we're going to call it cmo1 dot features dot voipworld.co.uk. And the IP address will be the IP address of our processor Ethernet, so 10 to 1.160. The port will be 5061 because we're going to use TLS. And then what else we're going to do is we're going to add a cmo1.calls.voipworld.co.uk. That'll be the same IP address, 160. And what that will do is it will I'll use 5062. So again, we're going to use that, keep that TLS, but it'll be 5062. And what we'll do is I'm just going to copy this out of here, click on commit, and done. And as you can see, they're in there. So if we go over to, back to the routing tab now, there's two ways we can do this. We can not use the hostname resolution, and we can just simply put the IP address in here, 160 or whatever it is, 10 to 1.160. Or what we can do is we can actually be more specific and we can stick in RFQDN, which is resolvable on the communication manager or the session manager network hostname resolution. So what we'll do is we'll just select the time zone. Where are we? Europe, London. Where are you? Here we go, Europe, London, location, lab, and that should be fine. So what we need to do now is we're just going to add our SIP entity links in from CM to session manager 1 and to session manager 2, and that's going to be on port 5061. I don't need to worry about anything else in there. We can just click on commit. And then we'll just do the same thing we did earlier on, but we'll use it for, we'll set up our call trunk. So we're going to have two trunks. CMO1, we'll call this calls. FQDN will be that. We just need to change that to CM. Again, same thing we did last time. Europe, London. And we're just going to add our links into Session Manager. Session Manager 1, Session Manager 2. And remember, we can use 5062 for this trunk. And the reason I use 5061 for the feature trunk is I find that IX Workplace, or what's known as the Equinox client, it seems to prefer stuff coming in on the 5061. So all we'll do is we'll just commit that. And that's done. So we have those going to them. And then what we need to do is we need to configure an application sequence. So now we've added those in, we need to go to Session Manager. An application sequence is used for Avaya AST devices to get features, AAR table stuff. So what we'll do is we'll go to Application Configuration under Session Manager, and we'll go to Applications, and we just need to add an application entry. So we'll call this CM app sequence. I can type, and then we'll set it to be our feature trunk, and that's CMO1. And that's all we need to do. We don't need to worry about anything else in there. Click on commit. And if we go to application sequence, then we'll do the same thing, CM app sequence, and then we'll just select the one that we've just created, and that now has gone to, yeah, that's been applied. So if we go over to Communication Manager now, we have to do some configuration in here. So what we need to do first of all is we need to start with our dial plan parameters. So if we do change dial plan parameters, these are all fine. We can change this to be local extension first or uniform dial plan, and what that means is it will look at the local extension, all the local extensions that are configured first, and if it finds an entry in there, then it will use that. If not, it will then use the UDP table. We can change it around so it can use the UDP table first before it starts looking at the internal extension range. I like to set it as UDP table first because it just allows for more expansion, and it's a bit more flexible if you're interconnecting systems. So what we can do is we can save that. So F3 to that. And what we need to do now is we need to change our dial plan analysis. Now what we're doing here is we're basically setting our extension ranges, our codes for feature access and stuff like that, dial access codes. So I'm going to say that we're going to start with the 1000 range, the total length will be 4, and the call type will be extension. And then I could also do the same with the 2000 range and say 4 is going to be an extension. What I need to do now is I need to specify my feature access code range. So on the feature access codes, usually have a code to enable certain features and a code to disable certain features. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say star2 with a minimum or maximum total length of 3 is going to be my feature access codes. And then I'm going to say hash2 is also going to be a total length of 3, and that's also going to be used for feature access codes. And then let's see, I'm going to say hash 10 with a maximum of 4 is going to be my dial access code. Now what a dial access code is it's a code that you have on your trunk group, and it's used to basically dial the trunk group up. You don't dial the trunk group up when it's a SIP trunk, but on the old H323 trunks or the ISDN trunks, you could literally type the trunk access code and then dial it from a phone. Although that's not the same in the SIP world, you still have to put a dial access code or a trunk access code onto your trunk group. So now we've got all of those. What we can now do is I'm going to also add 9 in as a dial access code as well, and that's going to be used for an outbound line. So when we hit 9, what's going to happen is that's going to activate the AAR table, and it just allows you to be able to use that 9 to make an outbound call. So that's all in there. Now what we need to do now is if we do change AAR analysis, there'll be a load of stuff in here that we just need to clear out. So we'll clear that out and save that. And then if we go back in, yep, that's all empty. And the same with the ARS analysis as well. We need to basically clear all of this stuff out of here and save that. And then we just need to do the same. There's quite a few pages worth of this that we have to do it on. So we just have to be patient and clear them all out. In the case of you guys wondering what I'm doing on my keyboard, to re-enter the command instead of having to type it, you can just do an uppercase R and press enter, and then it will execute the previous command that you did. So that's all I'm doing is that. And then we have to clear all of this out. Do that again. Yeah, it's probably a good 10 pages of this or so. It's quite a few of them. I think we're coming to the end now. There we are. So there's nothing in our ARS analysis, so that's all good. And then what I'll do is I'll just issue a quick save trans, just so that if the system got reloaded, it's not going to take me back to the start and have to do all that again. So what we'll do now is if we do change IP services, we'll just check there's nothing in here to worry about. Nope. Then we'll do a change IP interface and then proc R just to make sure that that is enabled, which it is. So it allows H323 endpoints and gateways. The interface is enabled and it's in network region 1. So that's cool. We don't need to worry about that. Anything on the other page, we can always change this as well if we wanted to, but we don't need to. We can just leave it as that. So we'll save that. Now what we need to do is just make a change to our IP network region. So change IP network region 1, and what we'll do is we'll call this main lab, and then we have to put our SIP domain in here, which is voice.voipworld.co.uk. Allow inter-region IP to IP direct audio, and inter-region we can have selected to yes for the time being. I don't think we need to change those. There's nothing else in here really. If we were having survivable servers, then we would need to put them in here, but for the moment we don't have any survivable servers, so we're not going to have to worry about that. This can be changed if required. It's just basically who establishes the connection, and you can change it so the near end that establishes the H323 socket, or maybe the far end can be changed as required. All depends on firewall configuration. And then we don't really need to worry about anything else. So what we'll do is we'll just save that. If we do change IP codec set 1, because that's what's going to be used for our region, we can then specify the codecs that we want to use. So I like to use G72264, which is HD voice, if I can spell it right. So G.722-64 as my first one, and then I like to use G711 ALOR, and then G711MU, G.711MU, and then also G.729 as well. I like to add in and keep it as a 20 millisecond packet size. Go on to the next page. This is required if you want to use video, so allow direct IP multimedia, yes, and they are sufficient to use for video. You can change these as you need to, so like if you wanted to change the modem to pass through, you could change that. Fax, you could change it to T38 if it's required, or T38 standard. I mean, these are all sort of things that only need to be changed if they're required to match certain needs, but I'm going to change them to that anyway, because it more matches what I'm going to be doing here in the UK. So we can save that, and it's just saying that it may interrupt audio to IP endpoints if they are not rebooted. So we'll just press enter to that and that as well, and that's done. The next thing we can do is we can change our IP network map as well. So the IP network map basically puts devices in the specific region based on the IP address that they're coming from. So my IP address is 10.2.1.0, subnet bits is 24, my network region is 1, and 10.2.1.255 is the last IP address. If I had more core regions or network regions, and I wanted to put them in the put the IP addresses in there. For example, I had another office that was connected to the network, and its IP address range was 192.168.252.0, and that was a /24. Whoops, I put it in the wrong place. 192.168.200.0/24. Say I could put that in like network region 2, 168.200.255. You get the picture here, I guess. So we can save that. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to create some SIP trunks. So what I'm going to do quickly is just change my dial plan analysis, and I said that my SIP trunks or my trunk access codes are going to be #10 with a maximum of 4. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add a signaling group. So if we do add signal group 1, we could then set that up as SIP. And what we would do is we'd put our process Ethernet in here as our near end, and would stick something here. But before we do that, we have to do change node names IP, and we have to add in our node names SMO1, SMO2, and this one is going to be, let me just double check my system manager, wherever it is, down here somewhere. Go to SIP entities, it will tell me the IP address, so 10.1.1.20 and 22. So if we go back to site admin, 10.1.20 and 10.1.22. So those are added in there now. So what I could do now is I could do add signal group 1, change that to SIP. It's going to be TLS because I want it to be secure. We could do proc R in there, and we could do SMO1 in here. Network region 1, and then we're just putting our SIP domain of voice.voipworld.co.uk, and that's what we could do. We could add that signal group in. But because we've got 2 session managers, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that signal group we just added in, and I'm going to, I think it's change cluster session manager 1. So I'm going to cluster the session managers. I'm basically going to have 2 session managers in one signal group. They're clustered, and it just makes things nice and easy. And it's just, it's better for redundancy and stuff like that. So the command is change cluster session manager 1. And what we do in here is we just say sm cluster 1, and then we put in our node names of session manager 1 and 2 in here. If we had more session managers added in the future, then we'll just need to add the node name into the node names table, and then we could simply just come in here and edit that. It means you wouldn't have to like create further signal groups and things like that. So that's done. If I do add signal group 1 now, I'll do the same thing I did last time, but you'll notice down here, over here, it says clustered. If I change that, clustered, then what it will do is it will change this, and it will just allow me to specify the cluster ID, which was 1, that I created in the previous step. Well, also you might want to enable video if you have users that are required to use video on their phones or on their mobiles. And again, we'll just put proc R in here, network region 1, and then enter our SIP domain as voice.voipworld.co.uk. And again, most of these can be left as default, but you can change them as needed. Like you might not want to have direct IP to IP audio connection, so you could disable that and just hang the media off the gateway, but you don't need to do that. You can set it all to that if required. So this signal group is going to be used for my features, so I can save that, and then I can just do an add signal group 2 and follow the same approach. Set that to SIP. It's going to be TLS. Now, because this is going to be used for my call trunk where I potentially have calls going out to the outside world, what happens is we might not necessarily want to enable video on this trunk, and sometimes it can cause issues, especially if you're using H323 handsets. There's a part in the SIP message that contains like some session description for video, and some providers don't really like it, and what you'll find is calls can be made, but they'll drop after a period of time, and it can be really annoying. So we'll set that as 5062 because that's what we've got set on our SIP trunk in Session Manager. And again, voice.voipworld.co.uk. Again, we can keep that all as default. We don't need to change it. Voice.voipworld.co.uk. So we'll enter that. And now we've got the signal groups created. What we can do now is we can add our trunk groups in. So add trunk 1. And this will be called SM features. It's going to be changed to a SIP trunk, and remember my trunk access code and my dial plan analysis was star 10, so we'll make this star 101 because it's the first one. It's going to be a private trunk, so we'll set the service type as tie, and again the signal group for that is going to be 1, and I'm going to assign 128 members to that group. If we go on the next page, we don't need to worry about anything in here. on the next page, what we need to do is, because it's a private trunk, we need to set this as private. That can stay as service provider. And then on the next page, I just mark user as phone, and I put the telephone event type in here as 101. And that should all, that should all that we need really for setting up a normal internal trunk to session manager for just normal internal calls. So if we do add trunk 2, again, we'll change that to SIP, and we'll call this SM calls. Now this is going to be the trunk that's used to go to the session border controller for outbound calls. So what we'll do is we'll set this to public network, again, signal group 2, and we'll set that to 128 users. Now sometimes it can match the amount of channels you've got on your outbound SIP trunk. So if you have a SIP trunk from Gamma, BT, Verizon, anyone like that, and you have a certain amount of channels, you can always set the amount of channels to match here, or you can exceed the amount of channels. But one thing I wouldn't do is put less channels on your, or members on your trunk group than you actually have in your SIP trunk, because it's going to bottleneck and you'll end up having a load of channels wasted. So again, put in the trunk access code of star 102, star hash 102, go to the next page. That's all fine on there. It's going to be used for a public trunk, so that's fine. We'll use the public number and format, and again, mark the user as a phone, and I stick the telephone event type as 101 in here. Now, depending on the SIP trunk that you're connecting to, you may need to adjust some of these settings. This is just a kind of basic default configuration, but you might want to, turn off network call redirection, stuff like that. You might want to, change this to be from the from field instead of the P asserted identity. It all depends on what the SIP provider is requiring, but we'll leave it at that. So now if we do a status trunk 1, it's out of service. And the reason why it's out of service is we don't actually have any media resource yet. So what we need to do is add some media resource in, and that means configuring a G430 gateway or installing an Avaya Aura Media Server. So if we go back here and we go to the dashboard, you'll actually see that we have 2 trunks here, and they're down because there's no media resource. The other thing that we want to do as well is, if you're having dual session managers, you'll want to add in an entity link between the 2 session managers. So what we can do now is we can go to entity links, and if we just click on, or SIP entities, just click on session manager 1, what we can do is we can just add an entity link that goes from session manager 1 to session manager 2, and it can be on 5061, that's fine. What we'll do is we'll just commit that, and then very soon these should change in here, and we should have 1 green tick between 2 of them, so that link's still coming up. So the other thing we need to do in communication manager as well is we need to set up a route pattern. So if we do change route pattern 1, what we need to do in here is we need to set the route pattern. So this can be for the feature trunk. And what I like to do is I like to make sure the trunk group, the signaling group, and the route pattern number all match. So if we have signal group 1 used for features, I like to tie it to trunk group 1 and route pattern 1. Just makes it a lot cleaner. So what we can do is we can call this CM or SM features, and then our trunk group in there is going to be 1. I like to set the FRL to 3, and basically FRL is just a number that allows you to restrict it on your class of restriction. We'll cover that a bit more very soon. And then what we'll do is we'll come down here, and the number and format is going to be lev0 private, and I just set that to rehunt. And then we can enter that, and if we do change route pattern 2, we'll do the same thing, give it a name, SM calls. The trunk group is going to be 2, the FRL is 3, and then because it's a public trunk, we'll set that to public unknown, and that's fine. So we can enter that and we can commit that. Next thing we want to do is we want to change our private numbering table. So change private number in 0, and we want to add our extension lengths in here. So it's going to be, we're using 4-digit extension, so we're going to add that in as 4. Extension code is going to be 1 because we're using the 1000 range and the 2000 range, and then my trunk groups here are going to be 1. We don't have to give it a private prefix, we just need to tell it that the total length is 4. So what happens is when a phone goes to subscribe its features, like SIP phone goes to subscribe its features to Communication Manager, what it will need to do is it will need to be a member of the private table. Otherwise, it's not going to get its features properly. So we have to enter that in there. And we can also do the same with the public numbering table. So what we can say is if we do change public unknown number in 0, if you have a range of DDIs, for example, so again, maximum length 4, say we had I don't know, a range of 1,000 DDIs and our extension code was 1, what we could do is say anything dialing out of trunk group 2, if it has an extension code of 1000, then what we can say is, we want the last 4 digits to be, 441483, 837, and then 1000, 1001. So we can leave it as that and set that as 12. Again, we can set this to 2000. Trunk group 2, we can have it as 441376, 189 for maximum 12, and it'll just like put 2000 on it. So if extension 2000 dialed a number, it would display its CLI on the on the outbound call as 01376 189 2000. So we can do that. And what we need to do now is change our AAR analysis. So change AAR analysis 0. What this allows us to do is it's just the alternate route table. So we're going to say that for the extension range 1000 and 2000 with a minimum and maximum of 4, they're going to use route pattern 1 because they're private, and the call type will be lev 0. So what it will do is it will make it private, but it will also remove the plus from the number as well. So we can add that in there. And again, what we'll do is a save trans all. And now that's done. So that is how to configure Communication Manager. What we're going to be taking a look at in the next video is how to install the Avaya Aura Media Server, because what we need to do is we need to get some media resource in order for us to get those SIP links up, because at the moment the only one that's up is the Session Manager to Session Manager. These 2 links here don't have any media resource. So we'll stop the video there. If you thought it was good and you enjoyed that, then please give me the thumbs up, please subscribe, and feel free to leave any comments in the comment section below.